We actually released a Dreamcast game pretty similar to that concept, named Frame Gride. It's a mix of fantasy and mecha genres, both of which I love working on. I'd love to work on a game that evokes the same themes as anime series, like Aura Battle or Dunbine in the vision of Escaflowne, but it would be incredibly difficult to do so. In July 1999, Fromsoftware released the title Frame Gride exclusively on the Sega Dreamcast. It was a mech action game that took place in a fantasy-style setting. This was the first and last time Fromsoftware explored the genre. Miyazaki mentions the titles The Vision of Escaflowne and Aura Battler Dunbine, two prominent mech fantasy anime that released in the 80s and 90s as sources of inspiration for a potential future game. However, Miyazaki knew the limitations of Fromsoftware. Such a game would simply be too risky and ambitious at the time. I want to work on a game like that, but other people at Fromsoftware would think that would be an impossible idea. Following the commercial success of Elden Ring, Fromsoftware's employee count and capital rose substantially, going from 316 employees and a capital of $1.8 million in 2020 to 456 employees and $125 million in 2025. This would serve to allow Miyazaki to consider pursuing projects that were previously thought impossible. The following shows the recently leaked code names and their corresponding project names. It is implied that the F stands for fantasy in most cases. The leak states that the next multi-platform major Fromsoftware release has the codename FMC. If we were to speculate, it could stand for Fantasy Mech Combat. Following the release of Armored Core 6, Fromsoftware put out an application form to be recruited as a character designer. What was particularly interesting about this form was that they were hiring specifically mech designers for the role. The director of AC6, Masaru Yamamura, had already confirmed in an interview that there were no plans to go forward with a DLC. From this information, it's likely that Fromsoftware is working on at least one mech game as of now. The following quote comes from an alleged ex-playtester at Fromsoftware. Between my working on Verdict Day and Dark Souls 2 as a playtester and part of localization, an internal memo with a poll attached was sent to all employees. It was asking which older IP to revive as an experimental side project. Frame Gride was one of the options for doing a remake. It only took third place, sadly. Still, it was there, and my colleagues were of the mind that a remake should be fleshed out with being a mix of on-foot and in-mech experience, with mech building in Dark Souls like on-foot play. Some of these people ended up leaving and later were part of the development of Demon X Machina. First and second place were taken by Tenchu and Otogi, respectively. These two were later combined into Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice. In this case, the remaining first place goes to Frame Gride as the top contender to get some sort of spiritual successor. The alleged playtester then mentions that Bandai Namco had a lack of faith in the project, that being one of the primary reasons it didn't take off. As of recently, Fromsoftware is currently in the process of switching to self-publishing. Additionally, Bandai Namco has expressed interest in the Armored Core franchise following the success of AC6, indicating that they are most likely more receptive to such an idea now than they would have been previously. Some may wonder why the King's Field series hasn't been remade yet, nor placed in the top 3 as contenders to be remade. However, this quote by Miyazaki in a 2016 interview sheds light on why this may not yet happen in the immediate future. We always look back at our back catalog for inspiration for new titles, but when it comes to very old things like the King's Field series, I'm concerned about just mimicking the style of what now Toshi Zien, the founder of Fromsoftware, created for the PlayStation original. I would rather not go back to it simply out of respect. Due to most of the employees who worked on Frame Gride no longer working at Fromsoftware, it is likely a successor to the game would be a complete reimagining of the series, resembling Frame Gride in the same way Sekiro resembles Tenchu or Otogi. A few further quotes by Miyazaki give us a little more insight into the nature of his next major release. I'm already working on my next title as a director, so I'd like to avoid giving too much away there. In the mid to long term, I would like to work on a more abstract fantasy than anything we've done in the past. I believe that will translate into being able to show the world the so-called new Fromsoftware, as well as the types of games that we will be developing in the future. I've said this before, but I'd really like to make a warm game, something like Papalo Croix or Eco. Miyazaki often stresses in these interviews on how he wants to shift the focus personally away from traditional Souls-likes and commit to more experimental titles. Fromsoftware employee Kenneth Chan was listed as a producer for a Fromsoftware title that begun development in early 2022. It is very possible that Project FMC, which is reportedly in the final stages of development, is the very project that begun in early 2022. We could expect such a project to release in mid-2026 to early 2027.